you didn't bring questions. So, because she's got answers, great answers. In fact, I'm sure we're going to run right up to the time. So, and then also tomorrow is Brad Knoll, and Brad is going to be talking about some dynamic stuff. He's from Indiana. He owns the brokerage, and he has a successful team, small team. He's a younger guy, and they have done this campaign that is what basically the campaign is. What are you going to do with the equity in your home? Not just like, do you want to list your house? Do you want to sell your house? What are you going to do with the equity in your home? What could we do? And it was so dynamic when he was showing us on another forum. And I just asked him, I said, can you come and just show us? He's done videos. He's exactly from the launch of the campaign to how they continued. And he's got 5 CMAs as a result of this right now, I think, that he's doing. And some listings that they've already gotten that never would have come out. And they're all from the people that they already know in their databases. So anyway, I'm real super excited about that tomorrow. So, all right. So 5 minutes and then come back and we will have Raquel leading us. So take a break.
Carol, would you on this page?
What?
Are we still in this Zoom room then, or do we go to a different
No,
Zoom?
same Zoom room. I'm not closing anything. Rhonda's coming in, and just come back. Just
Thank you.
Mute yourself and then come back.
And Carol, would you pause the video so that way it'll be easier for me to cut the videos?
I mean, that's what it's there for.
Okay, so let's get ourselves started. Hi. Look at Kathy Shunk joined us today. Hi, Kathy Shunk.
Hey.
Dana Poole, Andy Jackson, and Glenda Dupe, and Jennifer, are you coming back? Jennifer Zanker. So everybody, cameras on if you can, please, and let's get going. I'm gonna go ahead and give you agents mentoring agents. We now have a name for you guys, AMA, and so we have APA, AMA, and then we may have some more. So this today is going to be a kind of a grab bag of everything in whatever kind of questions that you want to throw at Raquel. Raquel seems to be the one that I always notice when somebody puts a question out on agents, all agents, that Raquel kind of holds back for a little bit. And then she comes in and she's got stats and she has examples. And I mean, she's like that kid you don't want to compete against in the science contest, you know? Like doesn't just go get a whole pair of socks and a couple of 2x4s and make something. She like has it all.
I did have a tendency when my kids were in elementary school to take the school parties and any PTO function I did to a different level.
I'm sure.
But I was not the mom that showed up with, juice boxes and cupcakes and called it a party. I was like, no, you've got to have decorations and, whatever. It was a problem. Yeah.
That's okay. In high school now. You know what? You take all those skills and they all transfer into being who you are today.
Yeah.
Which makes you
now I'm making the cutest little pot pie.
But a good trainer. So I'm gonna give the floor to you, and any questions that you guys. You were supposed to all bring how many questions? Like two questions.
I did get 2 from Katie, and I did forward those to Raquel earlier, but I didn't get any others.
So the rest of you, you're going to be asking questions just on your feet. And Raquel, you can take it from here and do whatever you want with this for the next hour. And for those of you who are mentor people, the more experienced agents who want to offer some thoughts, some ideas, some examples, just jump in where you can, or put something up in the chat that you have something to say, and we're calling you. Raquel, I'll watch the chat for you.
Okay, cool.
Take a breath in between.
I think what I'll do is I'll just kind of start with, and I'm sure you guys, your heads have to be swimming, because I just know that since I came over to Better Homes, and this is my 22nd year in real estate, I think. And I was with CBS Home for like 17 years of that. When I came over here, my thought was, I was just coming over to like a better culture. I had no clue how much I didn't know and how I could do things. Like I always believe you can do things better. There's always a different way to do it. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. It's just, I think there's something that can always be tweaked and done better or differently. I had no clue how much better it could be. And so I can't imagine taking 3 years of just ATAs, and then you guys have ATAs and AMAs and Buffini, and it's like, I mean, you guys are in like grad school at this point and it's finals week. So don't ever hesitate to just reach out and ask anybody anything, even if you think you know the answer, and sometimes you just need someone to tell you you're right. Sometimes you just need that so that you have that sense of confidence with the client. But the couple of questions, I'll start with those, and I think we'll just get the conversation going. Someone said they doesn't really have anything to do with FSBOs, which is fine. The last 5 or 6 offers they have written with buyers we have lost. I keep hearing about escalation clauses, wondering if you could give some insight on that. I'll give you kind of some pros and cons. I don't love escalation clauses. I do think they're kind of I don't know how to say this, like, they're kind of lazy in a way. If you have a house that's listed at, let's say, 285, and you, as a listing agent, I get an offer for 285, and you have an escalation clause up to 300,000. Do you guys do you understand how the escalation clause works? And just, okay, don't, yeah. So what'll happen is, in the escalation clause, my buyer is going to write up, how do I say this? We're gonna make the seller an offer. So let's say this is a $285,000 house. I will educate my buyers that with an escalation clause, I think that you do need, if you're going to go over the asking price, you need to start a little bit over in the first place. So what you're doing is you're saying to the sellers, I'll give you X, but if somebody else offers higher, I'll raise my offer in certain increments. So for example, in this case, we might say, okay, it's a $285,000 house. I'm going to give you 290, but I will give you up to 300, and I'm going to go in $1,000 increments over the next highest offer. So if that seller gets 2 offers and the other offer is 293, we said we would go over the next highest offer in $1,000 increments up to 300. And so in that case, if we offered 290, somebody else offered 293, and we said we would go, over it by $1,000, our new price is 294. So if the seller wants to take our offer and they invoke that escalation clause, then we would pay 294 for the house. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So what you're seeing though is obviously some of these offers are going well above the offer, the max price that your buyer is willing to pay. So if your buyer is only willing to pay up to 300,000 and somebody offers 305, your escalation clause is a moot point. You got beat out. What agents don't like about the escalation clause is in the addendum, and I don't have one right in front of me. It states in there that you'll share the competing offer. And all that is that's just proof that you actually had an offer that was more money. So there's a couple of things about that. I've only done that one time. I've only actually accepted an escalation clause one time. I did not want to share the entire offer with the agent. I told them that we would share page 1, but I also told them that I will be blocking out the company and any buyer information. So I had to black out all of the, the initials at the bottom. I blacked out the company name because I didn't, it's not fair to your seller. I don't think in my opinion, if you're willing to pay up to X amount for a house, then just step up to the plate and pay it, because that's what you're willing to pay for the house. And so I think that's where a lot of agents don't like the escalation clause. So what you're seeing is buyers are putting in escalation clauses saying, look, your house is listed at 285. I'm going to give you 290. But if somebody else steps up to the plate, I'm willing to pay up to $300,000, and I will go up that high in $1,000 increments above the next highest offer. So as the listing agent, if I see that, I can do one of two things. Maybe I have other offers, and the next highest offer was 293. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and say to that buyer, hey, we really like your offer. It's got better financing. Maybe the closing date's better. Maybe they're not doing an inspection. It's not just the price, but maybe that offer they liked better for whatever reason. We like your offer better. would you guys be willing to do 294? And they said, yes. Oh my gosh, we love it. We'll take it. Then all you do is you just simply counter it back and you say offer accepted, accept purchase price to be 294, escalation clause not accepted. All other terms to be conditioned, and then you make sure you put an expiration time for the counter. That's all I would do. And then that way you don't have to share any offers. It's not an escalation clause. You're not, you're just like, look, you were willing to pay it. We're countering the price. It's simple. Does that make sense? All right.
That's
Kristen
by
or
the way
Kathy,
also the, Raquel, that is what Tom is adamant about that.
just countering.
He throws out escalation clauses. I think
anytime you start, Carolyn Kessick, if you guys know her, she's an agent over at Berkshire. She's my pseudo mother-in-law. She always talks about mucking up the waters. And she's like, there's no reason to muck up the waters. Just counter the price and be done with it. So keep it simple. Seriously, just keep counter offers as simple as you can and to the point. And let's see, Kristen just said, yeah, you encourage buyers not to use. Yeah. And I hate using them in this market. I know it's kind of a necessary evil, if you will. And I mean, I can't, and anybody who's written more than a couple of offers or been in this business a year, I mean, it is just nuts out there. When my buyers that just got accepted, we did do an escalation clause, but they didn't take it. They actually accepted our offer as written. I have no idea if they got other offers. I have no idea if we were, if they just accepted ours and wanted to be done with it. The other offer that my people wrote was 285. We wrote 290, went up to 305. We did not get that because we did not write in the contract that my buyers would pay the difference from the appraised price and the list price. And so we learned from that mistake. So even though we wrote an escalation clause in there, the offer that won on that one, she called me and she said, I had 4 offers that were almost identical. The one that won is the one that paid put in their contract that they would pay the difference in the appraised price. So unfortunately, that's what my buyers ended up having to do. And we wrote that in this last contract and we finally won.
Raquel, are you being asked for, or do you show proof of funds when you do guarantee that, when you do say that in a contract?
Whenever I do an escalation clause, I make sure that the pre-approval letter meets the highest price that we're offering. So if it's a 285 house and we're willing to go up to 300, I make sure the pre-approval says 300. As far as proof of funds for the amount being different, I do not. No one's asked me for that yet. Luckily, the only 2 times that I've actually written an offer like that have been accepted, both people were putting at least 20% down.
So we had one, and they actually gave it to us with the offer. They were 50,000 over asking.
Wow.
And gave us proof of funds, and they were also putting 50% down. And they gave us proof of funds to show the coverage, and that they had been put into a separate account.
And I think that's important because I'm seeing, this is something, I had a conversation with someone the other day about this. I am starting to see a lot of houses, like a high number of houses back on the market.
Yeah, me too.
There's always houses that come back on the market for whatever reason. Some of them are valid, some of them are cold feet. But I am seeing a lot more back on the markets than I have ever seen. And I think what's happening is it's a combination of buyers are so excited they want to get a house, and then they're willing to pay it. And then all of a sudden they, somebody's like, you paid what for that house? Or, oh my gosh, And so they're getting cold feet and they're walking away. And then I'm sure you've got some situations too where, it's contractual, whether it's financing or an inspection or whatever. And those are just part of the game.
Or the appraisal does come in low, which I've heard of several low appraisals coming in. And when it comes down to it, they don't have the funds, or all of a sudden they start counting their money and they're like, oh, hell no, we can't do this. And they back out. So the other thing would be for you to speak about is non-refundable earnest deposits.
Yeah. And that's something that we've been talking about doing too is, so I just had a conversation with a buyer Then he asked me about earnest deposits, and he's a great buyer. Like financially, he's a great buyer. He doesn't need to sell his house in order to buy. He is going to be a buyer that can put down a little more money and, pay the difference. So I said, normally we would say $1,000 per 100. So on a $300,000 house, as a listing agent, I would expect at least a $3,000 earnest deposit. And that's a credit for the buyer at closing, even if they're only putting 5% down. That's a no-brainer. If you get something like cash, we have decided that we are going to start asking for non-refundable earnest deposits, because if you're doing cash, there's nothing for you to walk away from anyway. We can provide, and the way I would write it in there is I would say earnest deposit to be non-refundable for any reason other than seller unable to provide clear title. So if, you're on mute, Carol.
At what point do you put that in?
I would do that at the beginning. I would counter that. So let's say we get the perfect offer, cash offer, no inspections, close whenever you want. I would just be like, hey, offer accepted, except earnest deposit to be non-refundable for any reason other than seller unable to provide clear title. And then that way, if they change their mind, you can, and depending on the price point of the house and cash and the amount of interest you had on the house, you could easily up the earnest deposit. I just did one, which was a $20,000 non-refundable earnest deposit. And that was the day that he signed off on the contract. I said, okay, now I need to get the earnest deposit. I was like, that's $20,000. If something comes up and you find out you can't do what you want to with this property, you have two options: walk away from $20,000 or you buy it anyway. So it's a little nerve wracking, but on a house, you're talking $4,000 to $5,000, and it's a lot of money. But if you're paying cash, I highly recommend that it's a non-refundable earnest deposit. If they're going up and over, the list price and they're willing to pay that difference, like what Carol was talking about, let's say they're willing to pay, let's say it's let's do easy numbers, 375, and they're willing to go up to, or 275, and they're willing to go up to $300,000. And they say in the contract that we will pay the difference if it doesn't appraise. So I firmly believe that I will stand behind my list price. I will fight for my list price. Anything over that, I don't think it's fair to fight for it, because as an agent, I've already done the homework and kind of found where I think it's going to sell. So I always say that I tell my sellers, I will fight for my list price. Above and beyond that, we just have to look at the comps and see what's there. And I have conversations with my sellers about, can we push this? Are we being, sometimes comps will show me it'll be worth 383. And I'm like, nah, you know what? Let's do 375 because we don't have a master bath, or we're on a busy street, or the kitchen's not as updated. But I would say if you're getting somebody that's willing to pay the difference, and you're not talking about $5,000, you're talking about 10, 15, or like in Carol's case, $50,000, I would highly recommend increasing the earnest deposit and making it non-refundable. And the reason being is because if they do that appraisal, and let's say it was a 350 house and they offered 400 and it only appraised at 375, even though it's only a $25,000 difference, if all of a sudden they can't come to the table because they don't have 25,000 or they've changed their mind, you now have a situation where you're potentially putting it back on the market and you could potentially lose money. And to that token, if your seller's in the right, don't just automatically give the earnest money back. Don't just automatically let them walk away from the contract. If they agreed to pay the difference and they can no longer pay the difference, you need to recommend to your seller that they might want to contact an attorney, because not only would you have a right to keep the earnest money, but you may also have a right to, especially if you put it back on the market and get less money, you may have a right to sue the buyer for specific performance. But these are not things that you would do for them. You would just recommend that they might want to contact an attorney. But the main thing is just keeping a non-refundable earnest deposit so that situations like that come up, if they come up. These are not things that come up very often, but when they do come up, you want to make sure that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. So just look at the risk down the road for the contract. And that's why if you step this back to a normal contract and you accept an offer, 20% down, pre-approved, good people, buyers are good, they're with a good lender, They're not going to do inspections. We're going to close in 45 days. It all sounds like just normal course of business. You could easily do an earnest deposit, maybe on a $300,000 house, do a $3,000 earnest deposit and call it good. And if you're starting to get into more cash, I start to do non-refundable earnest deposits. If you're getting into offers that are exceptionally, like large amounts over the asking price, or they're willing to pay the difference between the appraised price, I mean, you're starting to get into a lot more risk. You need to start doing, for sure, non-refundable earnest deposits and really starting to look at the risk for your seller. Because if your seller takes it off the market for a month and a half and has to put it back on the market, it's very possible that they could get less than what they initially accepted, especially if you had a multiple offer situation. You let go of 2 or 3 other offers, it's possible that they could end up getting less. And it just every situation is different. I shouldn't even have brought that up, but every situation is different.
Some of the more experienced agents that are on here, are you seeing in your encounters when you're representing a buyer, are you seeing sellers counter you back with non-refundable deposits? Who can add here? Kristen?
I have, and I've also seen buyers, the listing agent, before we even get to negotiations, if they want a proof of funds to cover anything that it's not appraised for. So any price above what it's appraised for, they want that proof of funds. They want to know that my buyers can do it. And if they can't, they almost always take us off the table.
So wouldn't it be my thinking behind this too, to add to both of those, is wouldn't it be better to prop them up early on and have all those things right up front?
Yep.
Like in your summary, you already have that. You have a copy. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we're going deep now into, proof of funds. We say we're going to do this. How are we going to do this? And even as a buyer, to offer your earnest deposit to become non-refundable within 72 hours or something. Like even before the seller has to mitigate his risk, you mitigate it for him.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
think
think
ahead.
that's huge. And I think those are conversations that you have with your buyer.
Yeah.
And it comes down to, you need to mean what you say and say what you mean. And you're making a promise to someone who does not know you at all. And so I think it's important, like Carol said, you just need to prove that up front.
Rise to the top of the pack.
Yeah. And I hate to say, it's interesting. I've gotten, like, for cash offers over the years, I've gotten proof of funds. And it's so funny because every now and then, I had one time, it was a $300,000 property. It was cash. We got proof of funds. The proof of funds came from the wealth management company, and he showed the bank balance, or the balance of the guy's portfolio, and the portfolio was like 2.7 million. Now, I'm not sure I would have wanted that much shared with somebody. I just needed to know that he had enough. I just needed a letter from somebody saying he had enough money to cover it. But at the end of the day, you know what, to be honest with you, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of money. I just need to know that you have this much money to buy this house and close on it and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on
Never
to
take anything for face value.
next question here.
Personal property. I've had a few deals where my buyers wanted to negotiate personal property. Is there a best way to navigate this? The nice thing about the new contract is pretty much everything that is in the new contract. We used to not even be able to put washers and dryers in the contract. That used to have to be a separate deal. I think play sets are in the new one, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another one that we used to not be able to put in. So that's kind of nice that there, if there's anything personal property, you just need to do it as a separate bill of sale. And then if it's something that's being conveyed with the sale of the home, just put on there they're being conveyed for either $0 or put like $1 and then nobody ever collects the dollar, for example. That's probably the best way to do it. Lenders don't care as long as it's on a completely separate bill of sale. And I will say, when it comes to personal property, spell it out. Don't just say refrigerator, say refrigerator located in basement bar area. Because it's
Mhm.
inevitable. You say refrigerator, and then the next thing you know, you've got the green one from the basement in the kitchen. Well, you said refrigerator, you didn't specify.
Katie?
Yeah, so just to kind of clarify too, Raquel, is it best to wait to get the offer accepted first and then start negotiating like like I just didn't, we had a deal last week where my couple really wanted these bar stools and I was like, really, I want to get you the house first and then start negotiating the personal stuff, but I don't know, maybe I should have just gone ahead and, I just wasn't sure if I navigated that correctly.
So no, I don't think there's any right or wrong way to navigate it, but I think what you can do a couple of different things. Number one, just reach out and communicate with the listing agent. And when you're asking them questions about, hey, I'm just kind of curious, okay, what's the most important thing to your sellers? I mean, can we do this? Can we hire a cleaning company? Can we give them extra time? Okay, cool. And you got the closing date. Okay, cool. My people are totally pre-approved, blah, blah, blah. Hey, by the way, would they be willing to leave the bar stools in the kitchen? Oh my God, they're totally leaving behind. Okay, cool. If you don't mind, we're just going to write that in. No, those were a gift from Aunt Edna. They're going to take them with. Okay, so there's your. If you get the offer put together, and at the end of the day, I've had this conversation with many buyers, they're just bar stools. You can get them at any store for the most part. You can get them on Amazon. At the end of the day, we can always ask them, hey, we really liked your bar stools. Where did you guys get them? Would you be willing to leave them behind? Can we buy them from you? That kind of a thing. You can negotiate it after the fact. I like to negotiate that stuff up front. Not that it's a deal breaker, but just try to find out. Now, if you're talking about couches and tables and stuff like that, a lot of times sellers, like especially in the States and stuff, you'll see a comment that will say, hey, most of our furniture is for sale. If there's something you want, let us know. Whenever I'm on the listing side, I like to have my sellers, I want a list of the furniture you're selling. I want the price that you want and give me the details. Is it Ethan Allen? Is it Target? Is it IKEA? Whatever. And give me a price for it. And then I usually put that on Associated Docs. And then people can just go ahead and do it. But if there's something like bar stools, I would just ask the agent if that's something they'd be willing to leave behind. If the agent is not sure and you're in that multiple offer situation and you got to get the contract written, two things. Talk to your buyer and just say, hey, how important are those bar stools? And at least you brought it up. And if they're like, don't worry about it, I'll say, you know what, for this, let's just leave them out. Let's just leave them out of the contract totally. If the agent goes, oh, I bet they'd be willing to leave them behind. I'm not sure though. Just ask the agent. And a lot of times this just depends on how the agent's going to present it. Would you mind if I just wrote those in? And I'll make a note that if they're not staying, that's no big deal. Yeah. Just go ahead and write it in. Some other agent might go, well, let's address that later. And so I think you just got to feel out that agent. And you can, at the end of the day, if you want to, you could write them in, at $0 and saying if they're not staying, that's fine. I would just, especially on something like bar stools, I would just try to figure out if they are willing to leave them behind and then just kind of go down that path. But again, at the end of the day, just tell your buyer, they're just bar stools. Yeah.
Right.
They do get hung up on stuff like that. And I will say it is nice though, because all these bars are all different heights now and you get bar stools and they're too high. Yeah. So, and the nice thing is too, if you don't do that up front in the traditional sense of real estate, I have used stuff like that as a negotiating tool on inspections. When in the traditional way, when they did the inspection and came back and said, hey, we want all of these things repaired, I've said, I'll tell you what, how about we leave you the washer and dryer instead? And then I tell my sellers, hey, they're going to take the washer and dryer in lieu of the repairs. They're like, oh, thank God, because we didn't know what we were going to do with that. I'm like, I know, we're such good people though. We're going to leave them the washer and dryer. It's nice to be young couple just starting off. Yeah.
That's true. That's why we generally don't put the washer and dryer in the contract, even if they don't want it.
Yeah. Well, and you can sell those things.
And you can sell them super easy. Yeah.
All day long. And most people will take them if you just, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. The thought of having to pull my washer and dryer out of here to move it, not worth it. Not worth it.
I think everything that you're saying about this is really important, particularly for new agents, is don't let the things, the little things get in the way of the contract, because it can bite you in the ass so easily when it's, somebody's like, well, why don't you just give me that, keep that chandelier in here. Well, that belonged to their great grandmother's, aunt. And yeah, so keeping things out, keep it clean, keep it with the property, do everything else separately, and nobody gets attached to anything until it's done. So
And you'd be surprised once you get a contract together and you as a buyer, you know, get your people right away doing the earnest deposit. There's nothing better, especially on the listing side, when you accept a contract at 2:00 and like an hour later you get an email from the buyer's agent with the earnest deposit already paid. You're like, thank you. You know, that's just little things like that. And then the next morning you've got in your inbox something from the title company already. You're like, oh my God, I love it when somebody's all over it. It just makes me feel like you're paying attention and you're not going to let anything slip through the cracks. So you kind of, as an agent, you let your guard down and you know, relay that to your sellers so that they're happy with the decisions. And well, I just got an email from an agent the other day. Hey, the sellers have a water softener and a reverse osmosis system that they rent. The company said they'd be willing to just transfer it. Do you want to do that? Let me know. Here's the information. The washer and dryer they don't want. My people are trying to decide if they want it. You know, it's just that after the fact, like, hey, here's some stuff that we're talking about leaving, like picnic table. Do they want that? You know, and sometimes people are super thrilled to take that stuff. Other times they're like, no, I don't want any of your stuff. So that's all the stuff like after the fact. So as far as bar stools go and stuff like that, if you can ask the agent up front and get a feel for it, go for it. If you can't get a good feel for it, or if they don't know, just leave it out and deal with it after the fact. Say, look, keep them focused. The priority is we want to get you this house. As soon as we get you this house, then we'll work on the bar stools, you know, so it's all good. I do think that's something important too. Once you guys really get into this, is especially with the market that we're in, you know, showing people multiple houses and watching them get desperate. Help keep your clients on track. When a client tells you they want this, and then all of a sudden they start sending you these houses, you need to like rein them back in and say, look, what are we looking for? Like, why is this house going to work when you said the reason you're moving is X? I had clients recently, dad moved in with them and they're looking for a ranch. We just bought a 2-story. Go figure. But I mean, the first thing I said to her was when she sent me the house, I go, boy, that's got stairs. Like you have 3 steps. This has 5. And she said, but look at, and then when you look in the back, there's this little family room addition. They are going to put a door in back there and dad will have 2 steps to get into his like apartment. Like it's going to be perfect for them. But I never in a million years, you know, would have looked at it because we were looking for a ranch. But because of the market that we're in, we were trying to get more creative. A typical 2-story would not work, but this one just happens to work. But a lot of it is just asking the questions of, okay, wait. Let's get back to the basics. Here's what you guys are looking for. This is the reason why you guys told me you wanted to move. Let's make sure that this house check marks all those boxes for you. And I think it helps them buy into, you know, the creative looking, you know, I don't, it's just, I think you just have to sometimes look outside the box, but also help keep your clients focused and keep them on track. So what have you guys shown a bunch of houses? Has anybody written an offer and had one accepted yet? Where are you guys in the process on that?
I've shown and had offers accepted, Raquel. So,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Have you doing any inspections, or have they all been no inspections?
Probably half and half.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, probably half and half. So yeah,
Okay.
the no inspection ones are pretty simple. They just make me very nervous. But and that was another thing I was going to ask. So a deal I did last week, there was supposedly like a form we were supposed to have our buyers sign saying they agreed to no inspection. Do we know anything about that? Or I just feel like I'm dropping the ball because I haven't, they took the house no inspection and I haven't had them sign anything.
So it used to be, well, it still is technically, if you do an FHA offer, there's a form that you would fill out called for your protection. And it says, yes, I want a home inspection, or no, I don't want a home inspection. And you fill that out regardless if they did a home inspection or not. I always used to laugh. I'm like, why am I having them fill it out? They're doing a home inspection. But being that we're not having a lot of FHA offers, I think people have kind of forgotten about that form. So it was recently brought up that some agent at another company, this was at a WCR luncheon, it was brought up that she said, I have my buyers sign that on every offer, regardless of whether it's conventional, cash, FHA, whatever. She goes, I have them sign it on every offer that proves to, that they've signed off that I have recommended a home inspection, but they are choosing not to have it. That was one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, that's so simple. Like, that is so simple. It's one little itty bitty addendum. It's not even like, wordy. It's just straight to the point. Here's the reasons why you should have one. Do you want one or not? No or yes. And you initial it. That is a really good kind of cover your rear type addendum. It's not going to be like the perfect end all if something were to go completely wrong, which doesn't happen very often, knock on wood. But I do think it's important to, again, keeping your buyers focused. It's so easy to say, oh, I don't want an inspection and I'm going to pay $15,000 over and I'm going to do this and I'll give them whatever they want. And then what happens is something happens and it doesn't work in their favor. And now they start to resent their decision. And this is a good form to just say, look, we did talk about an inspection, we chose not to get one because that's what it took to get this house. So that can actually be found under .loop. Just type in, the less you type in, the better. Like type in the word for protection and you'll find it. I would recommend doing that on every offer.
Yeah.
Just as part of, in fact, Carol, is it a part of the purchase agreement to pull it over?
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Can somebody mute themselves?
Kathy, you need to mute yourself.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Looks like it was some back.
I don't know if it is part of the purchase agreement now, but I know it is an addendum in there. I don't know what the name of it is though. Does anybody know what the name of that addendum is?
It's called For Your Protection. I'll see if I can.
Okay.
I just pulled
It
it up.
should
For your
actually just
protection,
be
yeah.
part of the whole purchase agreement document. Because I do agree with it. One thing that I have learned over the years is, when you're in that, and this is particularly large right now because of the market that we're in and the lack of inspections. First of all, I just really am so grateful for agents who do pre-inspections. But if something comes into my head and it's like one of those questions, like the what if questions, and I am just hoping like hell that the client doesn't ask me that because I don't want to really answer it, I actually kind of bring it up myself and just say, I want to make sure that you have talked through this and looked at the what ifs, because if those what ifs come up in the middle of the night after you're already like in contract and you've not had them sign anything that says, here's what you're up against with no inspection, that's when you're going to be in trouble. And I am anticipating, because I've been in this kind of market before, because where I learned and, really got my wings in real estate, there was no, like, you took houses as is, like everything was out on the table. Here's the inspection. Here's the appraisal. Here's the termite report. Here's when in California, it was the seismic report to make sure that the house was braced to the ground for earthquakes. And there's $25,000 worth of repairs that need to be done. Take it or leave it. You have till tomorrow to write an offer, and that's it. And then everything else becomes non-refundable. So I think learning that way, I had to be a little more vigilant about making sure that we all were on the same page and understood. So I think if a question comes to your mind that is a concerning question that they may think about out of the heat of I got to get an offer here, then I think that you should have conversations with them about that, because you're better to get it off the table, on the table and off the table. Most people are pretty good with, as long as they can talk stuff through, but when they're answering questions in their own mind, it's not as, you're not going to be in such a great position representing them. You guys, any of you agree, disagree, or how do you handle things like that?
Yeah, I actually still do pre-inspections on my listings.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of firmly believe, and part of it too is you don't know when this market's going to shift. You can start talking to somebody in January and you may not list it till, May or June, for example. And what happens if the market changes and all of a sudden people are back to doing inspections? and you've listed it, but you don't have a pre-inspection. Or somebody wants to do an inspection for informational purposes only, and they walk away, but they want to tell you the reason they're walking away. So now you have knowledge of this.
Right.
And then the problem is your sellers are now left scrambling to try to fix this, because when you put it back on the market, agents want to know, why'd you put it back on the market? Well, they walked away from the inspection. Well, what was wrong with it? It's kind of like my mom always used to say, it's like a horse race. You got to be prepared, because when that gate opens, if you are not ready to go, you will always be playing catch up. And there is no reason to not be prepared. There really is no reason not to be prepared. I just sent an email to a seller that we're going to list next week. And I said, okay, let's just recap everything we're doing. Here's when we're doing photos. Here's when we're going live. Here's how showings are going to work. Here's when we're, did we discuss this? How are we going to handle offers and all that stuff just as they come in? I kind of gave them a synopsis. It's all stuff that we've talked about, but I literally just said, let's just recap everything and have a game plan so that when that goes live, we are ready. We're not still trying to find answers about the sump pump. We're still not trying to find out title questions, boundaries, or, is the repair guy going to come in?
Somebody's got background
noise. Yeah. Somebody asked about how long the pre-inspection is good for. I thought I saw that somewhere. Did I not see that? As far as a pre-inspection, I would say anywhere from 6 months to a year tops. I mean, it just kind of depends. If somebody bought the home 2 years ago and got a home inspection, I wouldn't really call that a home inspection. The funny thing is, though, if you do, let's say you have a listing and the buyer does a pre-inspection. This just happened to me. My sellers would not do a pre-inspection. The buyer did a pre-inspection, walked away because they felt that it had major defects. The inspection, in my opinion, was not a good inspection. He called out like that the garage needed gutters, and we were having a hard time understanding where he wanted us to put gutters on, because there were already gutters on the garage and downspouts. So we were kind of joking around going, I'm sorry, where else do you want us to put gutters on? There's no place else to put them. He said that there was no crawl space. There were 4. It was not a good inspection, but my poor sellers ended up having to play catch up and having to answer questions, and they didn't have to fix anything. But then at that point, again, why did it come back on the market? So that inspection, though, we actually used the summary, and I crossed off all of the personal information, and I uploaded that and told people that, it's been pre-inspected now. And here's the inspection summary from the previous buyer. So as long as you don't share the personal information, as far as we were concerned, my sellers now had knowledge of that. And so we had to disclose it. And so we shared it with the world. If it's my house, I can share, as long as I'm not sharing personal information with someone else.
When you do pre-inspections, do you do full pre-inspection or an investor's inspection, a major items inspection? What do you do?
My brother does almost all of my inspections. He's with Cornerstone. I just do a standard home inspection, just as if a buyer would. I upload the entire inspection, including the summary, on Associated Docs.
Yeah.
And then on the summary portion of it is where I make a note if we've fixed something or if we're not going to address it. And if they're not going to address anything, then I probably wouldn't put anything. But I just put on there what we did, because as far as I'm concerned, this is what we did. This is what we're doing. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the other thing that's really nice about pre-inspections is if you ever get a situation where maybe the inspector finds mold in the attic, for example, don't freak, by the way. If they find mold in the attic, that can be pretty common, especially when we get really warm days and really cold nights. It can, get moisture up there and not have enough time to dry out. But it's a really good opportunity for you as an agent to have somebody come in and investigate that and give an official report. Someone like A1 Mold might come in and go, oh, you just need to add ventilation, or this is really common, just do a Clorox solution, clean it up and walk away. Now you've got a professional putting something in writing that you can tie to that report, and you've had an opportunity to look into it on your own time. You don't have 2 or 3 days or 1 week to all of a sudden drop what you're doing in your life. And I don't know about everybody else's life, but I mean, just even with pandemic times, I'm like busier than ever. I cannot imagine somebody telling me in 1 week, I've got to get somebody in here, which anybody who's tried to hire a contractor recently, good luck with that. Get somebody in here and get an answer on this within 1 week so I know if I'm moving forward or not. I mean, that's just a lot of unnecessary stress. And that's another reason why I like the pre-inspections. If something were to come up that you didn't anticipate, you've got time on your side now. You know, worst case, you delay the listing, no problem. But at least you are prepared when you go out of the gate. On the pre-inspection, I do have on my pre-inspections, I put at the top, buyer acknowledges, you know, one of whatever, 40 pages of the pre-inspection. I do have the buyer initial that they got a copy. Because if anything were ever to come back on us, we can say that, no, you had a copy of the pre-inspection and it was listed. And that did happen to us one time. They said we didn't disclose something and it was actually a part of the pre-inspection. So,
Hey, Raquel, just to
yeah.
interrupt, for my buyers, when a seller has a pre-inspection or notice that they've done certain things,
Mhm.
I make sure that I have my buyers read that and initial. I have them initial the pages as well, so that I'm kind of covering myself too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I presented this to you. You said you read this.
Yeah.
You know, this is where we're at. Yeah, absolutely.
And don't hesitate to have your buyer initial. I mean, if you want to go hog wild and have them initial each page, not.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of time, but I do like the idea if there are, especially if there's, and you could even just add a comment, buyer acknowledges repairs that were made or something like that. All you're doing, like what Kristen said, is just saying, look, I just need in writing. It's like having a conversation with a teenager or a child. When you told them they could do something as long as they did this, it's funny how when this doesn't get done right, they turn around and say, but you said. I'm like, no, I said this. And so it's just, it needs to be in writing. It needs to be in writing, and you need to have people initial and acknowledge so that at the end of the day, there's never an issue because you acknowledged it. Yeah. I love pre-inspections, you guys. On the flip side, as a buyer's agent, I love it because it takes some liability off of me as a buyer's agent. There's a third party that's come in and it's you know, inspected the home. I do tell my buyers whether or not I feel that it's a reputable inspector. If I don't know the inspector, I will never badmouth an inspector. There's one guy in town that I would be very leery of, but other than that, if I don't know the inspector, I just tell my buyers, I don't know this inspector. I can try to get some information about this person. And then I would go, hey, you know, to all the Better Home agents, hey, does anybody know, you know, Hunter Home Inspections? And then all of a sudden they'd come back and be like, oh my God, it's fabulous. And I just share that information with my buyers. But I do think it's important that they are comfortable with the pre-inspection and any repairs that were done or not doing an inspection at all, because they're the ones that ultimately get the house. They're the ones that have to pay the bills. They're the ones that have to deal with, you know, water issues, if that is the case. But pre-inspections, I do think are I don't know. I still do them. That's just how I do my business, regardless of what the market's like. I just do pre-inspections because I think they're a huge marketing piece, a huge selling piece, and they make the offer stronger when you get them. Sold as is, who does an inspection for informational purposes? They are not telling the listing agent anything. Okay, so if somebody does an inspection for informational purposes only, and that has nothing to do with as is, but if you get an offer accepted and your buyer is allowed to do an inspection for informational purposes only, there is nothing. I mean, you can write in there as a listing agent, seller does not want to be notified. You either take it or leave it. We don't care why you're leaving it. As far as we're concerned, it could be buyer's remorse. You did the inspection. You don't want the house. That's fine. We're just going to put it back on the market. You do not have to be notified. And it's not a bad idea to, if you're countering it, to put in there that seller does not want to be notified of the reasons. That's why I like the old one. The old inspection addendum said option A or C. It was easy to just say options A or C. Just take it or leave it. But as far as sold as is, a lot of times you will see, we used to see that mostly with like estates and stuff, because you've got a power of attorney selling the house. And usually that power of attorney, you know, even if it's a child, the child probably, you know, the son hasn't lived there for 20 or 30 years. It doesn't mean he doesn't know things about mom's house, but he never lived in the property, or at least not for the last 30 years. When you're buying a property as is, that used to be a red flag that something might be wrong. anymore, I see agents using that kind of as a marketing, kind of a catch-all, if you will, to just simply say, hey, I'm just reminding you, we're not making any repairs. Okay, well, that's kind of the market we're in. But if they're saying sold as is, they're just telling you, look, we're not making any repairs. You just need to take it one step further. Is it an estate? Do they know? Is there a disclosure? Is there a pre-inspection? But yeah, if it's as is, they're not making any repairs. So keep that in mind, depending on if it does look like it needs repair, you know, just keep that in mind depending on what your loan is like or what your buyer's like. Wait, what was the second part of this? They had not listing agent found anything was found. I had the agent resistance on telling me info. Oh, so the buyer's agent, Kathy, the buyer's agent, where are you? There you are. What just kept telling you what was wrong with the house? That's, yeah, that to me is, well, and you know what you could do is if you countered that and said, you know, seller does not want to be notified, you could say seller and seller's agent, and then you could stop her and say, hey, if you keep talking, you're in breach of contract. And you could lose the earnest deposit. I mean, you could threaten that. I mean, it's true though. I mean, she's in breach of contract, and so therefore be a hard one to prove. But that's always kind of the problem with, here's my thing is, if radon's a really good example. When people used to want to do radon all the time, I used to say, no, you're not doing radon. Radon's fixable. If the levels come back high, you install a mitigation system and you all move on. You're not doing radon. Well, we're not going to tell you what it is. We're like, no, you're not going to do it. You're not going to tell us what it is because you're not going to do it. You can do it after you own the home. And I used to really put my foot down on that. I'm like, no, there is no reason that you need to. In fact, you can go to Lowe's and get a test cheaper that sits longer. That's probably a more accurate read anyway. And then you can figure out what the levels are and you can do the, you know, mitigation later if needed. If they did the radon before and accidentally said something to us, we now have knowledge. My people would then have to put a mitigation system in, potentially. So it is tough when you do these inspections for informational purposes only. I think you just have to make it clear, seller and seller's agent want no knowledge of any findings from the inspection report. You know, buyer is to only reply back that they will move forward or that they will be walking away. And the other thing I would do too is if it's for informational purposes only, I want a response that day. There's no reason why you need to be taking 2 and 3 days to make up your mind. If you're doing it just for informational purposes only, you're looking for a major defect. You're making sure that the wall's not caving in, that it's not flooded with mold, or there's a moisture problem. I mean, if you want it at that point, you need to just step forward and step up to the plate. Otherwise, I need to put it, you know, back on the market, or I need to allow somebody else's offer. And I do think that in this market with these sellers, you guys, with the amount of offers that the sellers are receiving and the amount of listings that are on the market, I mean, it's crazy. There's like, we're down to like what, 500 or 600 listings. There is no reason why as a seller's agent and as a seller that you can't say, just, you know what, just give me my money. I'm just walking away. There, I mean, the seller, be prepared, put that listing out there, but there's no reason that they really need to be doing anything. Just even if you only get one offer, you don't need to do an inspection and ask for repairs and stuff. If the seller doesn't want that, no, you know, I'm okay with inspections because I think in the end, they kind of protect the buyer and the seller. Kristen and Kathy, I'm sure you guys have had people in the past that have come back and said, hey, we didn't know that this was a problem. I'm like, well, you guys had an inspection. You know, we didn't know either. We're not electricians or plumbers or whatever, but you had the inspection. What can I say? So I think they're good in the end, but yeah, I think you just put your foot down and say, you can do the inspection. You've got X number of days to do it. You must respond by the end of, or by 10 p.m. the day of the inspection, and you'll either take it or leave it. And if they don't like it and they're going to start getting picky, they're not a really good buyer anyway. And they're going to start, you know, asking for bar stools later. No, kidding. So when we ask for information from a vision, do we just list that in the provisions inspection? Okay. Oh my God, Katie, the inspection addendum thing, we could talk about that for hours. Carol, close your ears. I hate the addendum.
We're going to be done in a few minutes. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk about that another time. And I do think like Tom and Leslie or somebody needs to hop on. The addendum that Better Homes created, I can't understand it, so I don't even use it because I'm like, if I don't understand it and I can't explain it to my buyers, how is the listing agent, possibly from another company, going to understand it? I just go old school. I just do either an addendum or put it in paragraph 10. Buyer will have inspection done within 5 business days. Make sure you can get it done. They're still pretty busy. 5 business days. Buyer will respond to the seller within 2 business days of receiving the inspection report. And at that point, I'd probably put on there, will respond that they will either be moving forward with the contract or they will be walking away. I can't remember how I wrote that. It used to be, we'd say option A or C. I just make it pretty clear because the earnest deposit, it's contingent upon that. And the earnest deposit paragraph covers the earnest deposit. You know, so if you do walk away, you would need to walk away, but you'd also need to ask for the earnest deposit back. So don't forget that. But for the most part, I just keep it pretty, it's just simple, straight to the point. I can't even go into the addendum that we have because I can't even wrap my head around the timeframes of it.
Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation. And I think we were planning on doing a follow-up to the actual use and the reality of using that addendum and the new contract too. So that will be later on down the road a little bit.
And I know we got to wrap this up, and you guys, like I said, anybody can call me or email me anytime. I'm totally, like I call my dad all the time still. So, I mean, it's awesome that I have that resource. So don't hesitate to call or email or text or whatever. I will leave you with this though. The best thing that you can do as an agent is read your contract. Know what your contract says, what it means, and what that means to your client. And if you understand that on the listing and the selling side of things, you'll be so far ahead of the game I mean, I can't believe the number of agents that don't even understand what they're writing up. So
any of you experienced agents that have one last bit of advice for these guys you'd want to add in here? Kristen, Glenda, Kathy.
No, I think Raquel did an amazing job with everything that she presented today. I always learn a lot from Raquel, so thank you for your time.
I think we're gonna have part 2, part 3, Raquel's Q&A.
Yes.
Like I said, I mean, I can't tell you. Yeah, well, there's a reason why I like working from home because there's a lot of choice words that I say when I see things. You know, like when people email out, I'm like, oh my God, read your contract.
I know.
This isn't kindergarten. So no, well, and it's just, I think at the end of the day, I think you've got to pay attention to the details. You got to know what you're writing. When you do a counter offer accepted, except purchase price to be $392, all other terms and conditions to remain the same. Counter offer expires at, make sure you put the time in there. There's just little things like that will just make you a better agent and keep you out of some of the, when you start listening to why people are getting in, not trouble, but like they're running into these problems. Yes, some of it's unavoidable, but find out why you hear about agents that are getting into these dilemmas and figure out what they could have done better and make sure that you implement that into your business and you won't run into issues.
More is better.
Yeah.
More is better. And always, you guys know this, if there's nothing else that we are, it is a totally collaborative group of people.
Oh,
it's
anybody
make the good life. And it's honestly, between Raquel and I, we have like 40 years in this business. Never have I ever seen this kind of really sincere collaboration where we each want each other to do better than they could even possibly imagine, and better than us. It's all we pull each other up all the time. So just reach out to anybody. Thank you so much, Raquel. Thank you for the rest of
anytime.
All joined us. This will be up as all others are up on our YouTube channel, and then hopefully we see you guys tomorrow at ATA with new ideas on ways to get your clients' attention in getting them to start thinking about what they're going to do with their equity in their home. And that could be a listing. It could be an investment property. It could be a whole lot of things that are going to make you look like you're gold. So, okay. we'll talk to you guys later and see the rest of you next week. And I think it's on growing your business. Is that what it is? Grow yourself, grow your business. Oh, damn, you have to grow yourself too? Okay. Thanks, you guys. Raquel,
Ready?
tons of things. Bye.